Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Blumstrom along with Amanda Fulbright, and you are listening to ABA Unfiltered, where each episode we interview guests from around the world of ABA. Whether you're a BCBA, RBT, or just interested in ABA, you are sure to pick up some actionable advice you can utilize on your journey. Now, without further ado, we would like to welcome on our guests, the authors of the book Responsible and Responsive Parenting and Autism Between Now and Dreams, Shahla and Rosales and Peggy Heinkel Wolfe. Why don't you both start by telling us a little bit about yourself? Shahla, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Hi, I'm Shahla and Rosales, and I am an associate professor at the University of North Texas in the Department of Behavior Analysis, and I'm just very happy to be here. This book was an act of love, and it's always nice to have the opportunity to talk about it, especially with my dear beloved Peggy, who I'll pass it over to.
And Peggy, why don't you go tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Peggy Hinkle Wolfe, and I'm a resident of Denton. I don't know why I felt like I had to say that first. Lived here a long time, parent of a 30-something with autism and two other wonderful grown-ups. And I'm a journalist. And yes, this book was totally an act of love.
Awesome. Well, excited to talk to you guys about this book.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining.
Yes, we are so excited that you're here. And I love this book. And I have so many things to talk about the book. Let's just kind of dive in if you want to. I know that this is a super valuable resource for autism parents and clinicians that might work with those with autism. I'm not an autism parent, but I do have two kids. And there were pieces of that book that I was, highlighting and putting stars by because they hit home with me just as a parent. And I think that it's just beautifully written. And thank you guys for writing it very much.
Thanks.
So you arranged the book into three parts, the power of learning, the power of connecting, and the power of loving. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you decided that those would be like your three anchors or pillars for the book?
Well, it was definitely a process. You may or may not know it. It took us over 10 years to write the book. Yeah. And partly because we are both parents and working and life was happening. But also one of the things that happened is we would go out into the world and then we would come back together and we would talk and we would try to, I don't know, to make a message that would be it would be a guide. And I think that was always a present idea for us, but how we felt we would most usefully provide guidance changed over time, and the world changed also. You know, the way services are delivered changed. The pandemic happened. We had life happening, and I think all along this notion of the cusp has been important to us, and so we really tried to pick just a few things that we thought would be very cuspful, and really that was the results, the learning, connecting, and loving, that we tried to think really deeply about what are three really strong, maybe even like North Stars for people to keep being able to adjust where they are. And those were the three we landed on.
And
you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a little bit. Because I'm a writer by trade, I can't help but talk about how I took notes when we were having all these conversations. These weren't, although there were times I was not taking notes, we're just talking and thinking. But at one point, all the notes got printed out and they got pasted up on the wall in my breakfast room, and they started getting sorted. So in some ways, the ideas there was some organizing principles at first, but it was too much and it was very academic. And we were trying to make it relatable to a wider range of readers. So yeah, it was fun. It was like a cut and paste. There were times where big chunks of notes got cut off that piece of paper and pasted over on the other side of the breakfast room, because that's where that idea belonged. So that's kind of how it came together. It was very organic.
I had forgotten about that part. and 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 how it was so inductive. I mean, we really thought about the stories and then went to that place. I forgot about those several mornings actually. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love hearing about people's organizational
Yeah.
styles as they're trying to, organize themselves around a large project, and writing a book is a very large project. Shahla, you just talked about the behavioral cusp, or things that are cuspal. Could you maybe elaborate on what you mean by that for some of our listeners that might not be as familiar with that term?
Yeah. So there are different ways of looking at development. And one of the sort of theoretical frameworks that's come out of behavior analysis is the idea of a behavioral cusp. And a lot of times in behavior analysis, we think of it as a skill that allows entrance into more opportunities in life. And I'm going to do a little behavior speak since that's your audience, but that allows access to new reinforcers, new environments, and new skills. And I think one thing about that is important about the concept is it is not just skills. Like environment changes can also serve as behavioral cusps. So and it is a theme throughout the book, because it has influenced, at least it's influenced my conceptual frameworks and how I look at early intervention. I think about the children I work with and the families, and really trying to think about what are the things that will promote accelerated development? What are the things that will promote more opportunities in life? And what are the things that will promote more agency? That both the child and the family will be able to make choices, and their voices will be part of what happens to them along the journey. So, and I think even early on when Peg and I met, before there was a word that we talked about this, it was an approach that we both shared, that try to make the right choices about and think about the decisions in ways that will be transformative. And I think that's one of the biggest things about the concept of the cusp, is that it is a concept. It's not linear, the change. It's a concept about transformation.
Yeah.
So I always say this, and I don't know if it's a if it's a good way or not, but from our grandmotherly positions, part of what we wanted to do is look back and think about what would be cuspal, what was cuspal for us, and so that was a concept that we used to sort of look at. It was our lens for looking at a lot of what we were saying and the examples we were giving. Does that help? I don't know if that's enough for the direction that you were thinking, but yeah.
And just a small thing to add as a parent, especially when my son was younger, it was cuspal for me to learn. I'm not using the word correctly, but you guys can indulge me a little bit. To learn that everything had to be broken down in bits and to teach him. And then it was cuspal again to learn that I didn't have to do that every single time. That's really important, because if you suddenly think you have to break every single thing down into little bits to teach, you just exhaust yourself thinking about what all the work you have to do. And it's really not true. If you pick the right things, you can just sit back and relax and watch them just bloom. It's really nice.
Peggy, would you say that as a parent that you experienced many of those kind of cuspal moments as a parent parenting your child with autism or your adult with autism?
I try not to parent anymore. But I will say the most recent example of something that felt cuspal was when my son, he drives himself to work. He needed a new vehicle. He did the classic thing for our family, which is to drive a vehicle into the ground. And then when it's 20, 25 years old, then you buy a new vehicle. And that's a cuspal. I don't want to misuse
You're
the word.
great.
Okay.
Don't worry.
That is such a leap of an experience. I mean, imagine a car that has no power windows, no cruise control, no computer in the dashboard, none of that material experience. And then this car gets delivered and it happens to be an EV. So you don't even power it the same way. So uh, um, he spent an afternoon with a friend who owned a Tesla. That's not what he bought. He bought a used Chevy Bolt. But the conversations in the house now are completely different about how we get around. And it makes me think about the world in completely different ways. So it's been very transformative for me. Buy an EV, you'll know what I mean.
Thank you for that. I think that we, myself included, often can think about behavioral costs for transformative moments for the children that we're working with or our own children. But I'll be honest, I haven't really thought about I as a parent or I as an adult, go through these transformative moments as well. That kind of rocked my world for a minute this morning. So thank you for opening my eyes to that. Not really sure why I hadn't have thought about that before, but of course we all do, right? We all experience those moments.
And I think as parents, we're so busy doing, and 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 there's a fair, and that's part of the title, the responsibility. It's a lot of responsibility to help this new soul journey out into the world, and all the hopes and dreams and anxiety you have about that journey they're going to make. So I think sometimes that pausing and looking at the organization of what we do and how we do it is not always there, which is why I think the being with other people, whether it's other people through a book or other people through conversations and stepping back, I think that is really an essential part of parenting, and to sort of honor who you are as a parent and the learning you're going through and the changes, I think is something we don't often do, but it is probably one of the most important jobs in human societies. We basically have a responsibility for shaping the future, and how we do that and the help we get doing it is important in our thinking about it. And I think Peggy brings up in the book about her love of books when she's giving her message in the very beginning, and how that helped her as a parent. And I think we really wanted to be part of that canon for parents, in addition to the playground conversations, because I think some of that awareness of who I have been as a parent also has happened on the playground with other parents, while our kids were running around or doing whatever they were doing, and thinking about, what are really important parenting steps we can take, that will affect our children in beautiful ways. But thank you for saying that, Amanda.
Yeah, well said, Shahla, as usual. So in the book, you talk about that our society does not place much emphasis on building new behaviors until there's a problem. We often wait and respond to a problem rather than working to a dream. That's powerful. You said you started this book. It took 10 years to write the book. And I'm not sure when that kind of statement came in. It was earlier or later in the 10-year period, but have you guys seen a shift in this, or are we still right where we started?
I think a little bit of that will always be there, because of aversive stimulation. I mean, one of the things that happens is when there's aversive stimulus, we go into action mode. We try to move it away, we try to change it, whatever. So some of that will always be there. But I think one of the things that has increased, in terms of our human knowledge base is that as we learn things about those aversive situations, we can also move into prevention. We can move into thinking about, like, if you look at the FA literature, it's really clear there are some conditions that people just have problems in. When we can't get access to attention or things that are important to us, when we can't engage ourselves in ways that don't hurt ourselves or other people, and also when we haven't developed grit to get through and master things that are hard. So with all of those situations, we've learned about those things as humans. And I think, I'm very honored to be part of a discipline that has really looked at those situations, looked at function, looked at how we work with those situations. And because we know all of that, I think we can go more into prevention and move more into the areas of how we like it to be, not just how we don't want it to be. But that does take some intentionality. And it also takes looking at our systems and designing systems that set us up to dream and construct rather than stop and destruct. And that is, I think, not only in our field, but probably for humankind, that is a shift we're learning how to make. But it was from the very beginning, I think also something Peggy and I shared about our approach is that we didn't, neither of us, and we didn't do it perfectly, but for our families and for the people that we worked with in practice or that I worked with in practice, I I think that it was always about how to teach, how to become, how to make it more, how to expand, rather than how to stop, how to stop, how to stop. Um, that was a philosophical agreement I think we had from the very beginning. I don't know if you want to add on to that. I feel like I keep jumping in.
No, well, I want you to go first because I know the audience of this, and also sometimes it takes me a minute to process the question.
Good.
And,
Okay.
and and then I hear you processing the question. It's like, okay, I know what I'm going to say, but it's
Good.
like 2 minutes after the question, I know what I'm going to say. I just, especially as a young parent, there was a lot to do. That whole busy thing is a real thing. And I didn't want to spend time on things that weren't building something. There was times that we were advised, you need to extinguish that. And being a writer, I knew what the word extinguish meant, and I didn't like using that word for my child. That doesn't feel very loving. But I also knew that if we got busy doing things we needed to do, that would crowd out some of the other stuff. And I just wasn't going to worry about it. And that was true. It did crowd out things that were frankly harmless. I was lucky that way. My kid wasn't, playing with knives or something like that. So, yeah.
You bring up an interesting point, Peggy, of he was doing things that were relatively harmless. And in your, point of view as his parent, that didn't bother you, and you were willing to be patient and let the rest of the things you were building crowd those out. And I believe it Glenn Latham calls them junk behaviors, if I'm right, Shahla. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I use that term a lot with when I'm talking to parents or frankly other clinicians, and I'm like, oh, that's just this junk. Let's just don't worry about that. We'll move on. It'll grow out of it. And if or they'll, their repertoire will get bigger, that they're not worried about that anymore. And I'm just wondering about from your perspective, how was that for you? Did you do a lot of that, kind of ignoring the harmless or junk behavior? And how might that have differed from other parents that were in your community or that supported you?
Oh gosh, this question is for me. Yes, it informed a lot of my behavior, but my behavior, wow, as a parent, wow, I just blew my own mind there. Um, but I think it's important to remember too, I was parenting in the late 80s and early 90s, and loads of folks were lost, if they knew anything. And then loads of folks were also really excited about let me hear your voice, and they were trying to make sense of that. So it was hard sometimes to find decent support when we were coming up. We felt pretty alone, but every once in a while, an angel would come by. His first speech therapist was really good at what she did. And we also had I guess you'd call it a play therapist, but not in the sense of traditional psychology where a child is recovering from trauma, but just someone who came over with toys I never thought of buying, and introducing them to Sam and seeing how he responded to them, and then having a whole world open up from that. So that was those kinds of things were really, really helpful. Did I answer your question? I just started rambling.
No, it was a rambling question as well. So
I'd like to add a footnote because you said Glenn Latham and we both brightened up. We actually, or I as a parent and as a professional, in fact, I used to teach a parenting class and that was one of the textbooks we used, but we have found great inspiration from his work. He was very good at minimizing what you said, the junk behaviors, and really, and we talk about this in the book, and really focusing on his metaphor is focusing on the sunshine, focusing on where you should put the sunshine, where you should put the sunshine of your attention, your time, your physical proximity, and really moving it towards the things that would be healthy to grow in the child. And so things like focusing on play, focusing on sampling new things, focusing on the language that goes with that, and how you arrange the contingencies so that the child progresses in those ways. And you have to, and you not have to, you are less likely to spend all your time focusing on what you see maybe as troublesome or what other people see as troublesome. Because I think that was also important about what you said, Amanda, is that part of it's what we want to do, but part of it, because we are a collective kind of species, what other people think affects how we do things. And especially as a young parent, the approval or disapprovals of people, we take that into consideration. And sometimes you really have to have a community that helps you look towards what you want to grow and away from what is a problem and move away from that. And it is easier the younger a child is. People are very forgiving about the things toddlers do, and it hurts less, than it is when you're 16. So that's also why the focus in our field and the focus in our book is also talking about, thinking early on and as you go along about how to think about those preventative steps before there is a problem, and how that naturally helps you fall into the dream about where you and hopefully the child as they get older choose to go.
Thank you for that, Shahla.
So another part of the book that kind of stuck out was you wrote a section that says behavioral interventions are constructional, not pathological. Can you elaborate on the statement and how you think this kind of affects the roles of parents, clinicians, and the child receiving services?
Um, well, let me say first, that is a very complicated question and a really good question. And it's something that I think as a field we're pondering on, and both from a conceptual framework as well as a pragmatic and technical framework. Um, so I think part of the reason we said those words in the book, and part of the reason that is my perspective and our perspective, is that if you think about the process of behavior change is just that. You're changing the behavior under different environmental contingencies. So even when we are moving away from something we would consider a problem, we're building something up. And that is actually part of our ethics code also. So in addition to the theoretical and the technical, there's also the ethical, is that when we are addressing a behavior that is problematic, we have to, by virtue of our ethics and the way behavior works, think about what goes in its place. Because if you just stop, that means not living.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, when we talk about pathology, and maybe that was a very extreme way for us to put it, because when we talk about pathology, we're trying to understand a disease and the underlying causes for it. When we're talking about behavior change, we're going in and we're asking the question, what's going on? What are the conditions? What are the skills or behaviors or responses that we're thinking about? And in the applied sense, we're looking at how it could be, and how it could be that would be better for that human being and the people around them. So by virtue of that, it is constructional, because we're building behaviors. We're not cutting them out and removing them. Because you can only do so much cutting with a human and then they're done. So the idea is that when we look from an applied perspective, that it leans away from pathological and a disease model towards a how could this be model, and how can we arrange the environment, how can, Peggy said it beautifully, how can we break things down into teachable steps. And I think this is true of any kind of education or teaching. It's building, because it is teaching. It's establishing some new repertoire, some new way of being in the world. Um, I also think, apart from the technical and theoretical, I think is a heuristic or something that helps us um, move forward in useful ways. I think that it's just a good way to think about things. If you're approaching it as a team, whether the team is the parents or the professionals or some combination. I don't know if that answers the
Oh,
question,
yes.
but that's kind of what we were thinking.
No, that's great. Thank you.
So another question for you, maybe Shahla can start this one. You're right. In ABA, therapy is a love and science-based interaction where two or more people are engaged in an interaction. And this is the very first time I've ever heard ABA described in this way. And for the record, I like it. But how might you respond to some more harder line BCBAs, behavior analysts, that might get itchy about the word love
Love.
describing ABA? You know
So,
them.
so I have to say there's several things to unpack with that. Um, One is that I should, full transparency, that was part of how I was raised as a behavior analyst. Even before I knew it was behavior analysis, my first exposure was actually when I was a teenager. I was working in a Head Start program, and I didn't know what the foundations of that program were. But the woman who ran it, Miss Juliet Whitaker, was one of my early mentors. And she, from the beginning, um, taught me about the importance of science and care and love in working with young children. And that program actually, part of what they were implementing was what was called the behavior analysis model. There was a big study going on at that time, and they were part of what was happening in the evaluation of different approaches to early childhood education. So I was seeing some programmed instruction, and I was seeing some work with behavior analysis without even knowing that what it was. But from her perspective, there was a very strong belief in the importance of science in educating young children. And then as I move forward, um, my early training with Dr. John Lutzker and Sandra Lutzker at SIU, there was such a deep focus on compassion and care and science and I kind of think there's a metaphor that's helpful to think about that, and that's a bird, that a bird can't fly without two wings. And if we think about those two wings of applied behavior analysis as love and science, that's what powers it. That's what moves us forward as a science. It's a metaphor. But then I went to Kansas, and one of the first articles that I read, it was published in 1978. I got to Kansas in the early 80s. So it wasn't a new article, but it was fundamental, was an article by Wolfe about the heart of behavior analysis and the importance of social validity, and and how, as an applied science, that the things that are important to human beings, and he says, like love, joy, all of those things, that they're not scientifically inappropriate or impossible. They're just scientifically difficult. And I think that's what our field has struggled with. What are the measures of joy? And actually, there's a young researcher, Jennifer Posey, who's doing some nice research in that area. And the Kegels for a long time have been looking at measures of affect and how happy children are in the therapeutic context. Denny Reed and Carolyn Green have been doing that work. So it's a long stream that has attended to the comfort and the happiness of people during intervention, children and adults. So it's not a new concept. I think to use the word love may be a bit stronger than in some scientific journals, but I think, and I credit some beautiful professional in New Mexico who said this when I was talking once. She said, it's honorable love. And so, and there are different types of love. There's romantic love. We're clearly not talking about that for many reasons, but there's an honorable love and deep affection we feel for each other as human beings. And we should surely feel for the children we're working with. And we know parents feel that for their children. It is the propelling force, the animating force of everything they do for their children. So I think it's good to speak those words of love, to say that is a core value we have in doing our applied work. I think, there's all kinds of applied fields. There's applied engineering, applied physics, applied behavior analysis. And I think for applied behavior analysis, our MOs, our reinforcers, I think we keep flying if our if our motivation is about the well-being and the happiness and the progress of the people that we're working with. And I think sometimes there's a lot of criticism, and then I'll stop because I know I'm going on and on, but I think sometimes we criticize each other in the field a lot. For example, if someone's using procedure X, we say, oh, well, they don't care about the clients. I really feel like the majority of people that I've met across 42 years or more being in the field, a majority of the people in our field really care about, they get into the field because they care about the people they're working with. I think sometimes, occasionally, that's not the case, or like all humans, we get sidelined and care a little bit more about something that interferes with that. But I think we can be pretty confident that that is an underlying motivation for most of us in the field. We work in systems and societies that are hard, and the best of us do things that we would do differently if we had the time and the community to help us step back and realign. So I feel as frustrated with anybody about the divisions and the criticisms and the concerns about what's happening in the field. But when I step back, I think most of us are on a path towards love. I don't think there's as much division as we think that there is. At least I hope that there's not. But I do think the L word is is a hard one. And this is the last thing I'll say. I have learned so much from feminist and womanist theories where there's a really a high level of comfort talking about emotions and talking about big emotions and ones that link us together as a group, as humanity. And I think that I hope, and there's an early behavior analyst, she's passed away, but Maria Ruiz, who has talked about um, what those theories can help inform the areas of emphasis for us and how we look at how we progress as an applied science. Um, yeah, that was a lot of talking. I don't know, Peg, do you want to add to that or?
I do, and it's going to be terribly strong. So everybody, I guess that was a trigger warning.
Yeah, that's good.
As a parent, it would be very alarming to me to have someone working with my child who has some kind of aversive feeling about love. So we do spend some time in the book talking about the different relationships and the value of parents as a full partner in the decision making and the steering. So and after I need to say too, after saying that really strong thing that I just said, I'm not sure I ran into anyone in my son's life that didn't get attached to him in one way or another, and not in a way, well, one person, but anyways, that because when you're a parent, you're thinking about boundaries too, and you're thinking about you don't want someone so attached to your child that they're messing in that boundary. So I appreciate the concern about boundaries. I think that's what people are concerned about, and parents are concerned about that too. But I don't think there is one of the most powerful things I learned was how to be attached and detached at the same time. And it's the same for a professional. You can be attached and detached at the same time. Um, so just, there there is nothing wrong with loving a fellow human being. Good Lord. But I don't know what the difficult conversations are. I mean, I know people like to talk about what they're doing, and that's cool. So, and they want respect for what they're doing, and I think most of us do respect what everyone's trying to do, and most of us understand it's a human endeavor. But I think we know how to do boundaries. I think most of us who are healthy know how to do boundaries. And most of us who are healthy really do want to be loving human beings. So let's just wrap our arms around that and pull that in nice and tight, because that's the best way to go.
I love that.
Thank you both for that. That was great. And I'm not a clinician by trade, but I am a parent. And I agree with both of you. As a parent, if I were to place my child in the care of a clinician, I would love them to be in that type of an environment where not only are they getting the scientific side, but they're also getting that love and respect, from the clinician as well. I think, like you said, the two wings of the bird, would allow my child to succeed more so than just one on its own.
And I certainly don't disagree with anyone that most people I've encountered as well do, love the kids or the people that adults that they're working with. I just don't know that we're talking about it. And I don't think that we're comfortable as a field talking about it. And I think that we should change that.
Yeah, I agree. There's a study I've always wanted to do. It's kind of a retrospective thing, but I want to go through JAB and JABA and count emotion words that are used. And and look at what the trends are over time. Actually, JAB, JABA, and behavior analysis and practice, because I think we would see a lot of fear and aggression. We're comfortable with fear and aggression, but we're not so comfortable with affection and love, you know, or feelings of safety or whatever all those other emotions are. And I think that what we'll see is I think we'll see a trend over time with all those what we consider, you know, favorable emotions, ones that we want more of. We'll see a little trend of those trickling up and more comfort talking about that. I think interestingly, the pandemic opened up a lot of dialogue in our field about some of those issues, and it also opened up a space for more people to be part of the discussion, people of color, people with autism. And those discussions have been hard and they're really important. Where we go with them and how we learn to have the discussions, because that's a learning, I think is going to take some practice and some feedback and some revision so that it is productive. But I think that's been a really important thing that's happened. Yeah.
I agree. I think most things that are difficult or hard are probably important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're coming up on time, but I cannot leave this conversation without commenting on one last thing. As a field, I do think, as you said, through the pandemic and other periods of time, we've made some modest strides in our field around cultural humility and understanding the importance of it. And in the book you write, the science behind any treatment plan will not be compromised when professionals respect our family's values and culture. Behavior analysts can continue to make their own practices stronger and be more resilient by learning to listen and respond to people who have different backgrounds and life experiences. And this includes families' perspectives and value systems and their child's emerging perspectives and opinions about the course of their life. That was a powerful statement, an important statement. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of considering a family and the child's culture and values when working with them? And for those of us that are still maybe kind of grappling with, where do I start? How do I start this? Maybe a couple of action items for them you could share.
You want me to go first?
Oh, please.
Well, that knowledge, those words were born of both experience and scholarship and interaction. I think there is, I'll start with the easiest one, the scholarship. There's a growing body of thinking and researching and experimentation about how to be more responsive to one another, especially the more different we are from one another. And because the world is changing, because there is more information about injustice, there's more information about who's not been able to have a voice, to have participation in decisions and what happens. As all of that scholarship grows, I think as behavior analysts, it's important that we contact it. And some of it's within the field, much of it is outside of the field. For example, there's an amazing scholar, Ruha Benjamin at Princeton, who talks about AI systems and how we design systems to be exclusionary or inclusive, and what that looks like and how it can shift. That's important for us to look at because we do design, and we need to think about the design of interventions, the design of our intervention systems, and how they either move us away from systemic oppression or how they move us towards justice and equity for all. So there's at the systemic level that scholarship helps us, but also at the individual level, understanding our biases, understanding that conversations with families, listening takes time. And when we're in a world of really fast billable hours and in our healthcare systems, we have to intentionally make time to sit back, be present, and actually listen. And to also understand, most of the families are young families. They're learning how to understand what their values are, and they're shaping the values for their family as they go along. So it's also the time to be on that journey with them and to accompany and listen to that process, and to help share information, because the things that we might understand from new studies coming out or the way things have been done, part of our job is it is a collaboration. It's not unidirectional. So we participate in that process of developing shared purpose and value making, but also understanding, and there's some really beautiful scholarship in early childhood education about this, understanding families have really different values. What one family cherishes will be different in another family. That's all there. So that's part of the scholarly part. I think at a personal level, um, I think having come from two really different cultures, that created a tension throughout my whole life of seeing, oh, there's really different lenses. And then living in a third culture, there are very different ways of looking at life, and to be comfortable in those in-between spaces and be comfortable in the provisionality and the changiness of it, that it changes for everyone. It's changing for us again as humanity. And then at an interaction level, I want to say that part of our being able to say that was the result of Peg and I being friends over the course of 25 years, and both of us having communities and understanding that listening and responsivity, again, cultural responsiveness, child responsiveness, affect responsiveness, contingency responsiveness is a theme throughout the book. And it is a skill. And it is a skill that you learn to observe. It's a skill that you learn to listen. And it's a skill that you adjust, that you change, you shift. So that is an ongoing theme in the book and beyond, I think, for us.
Awesome.
Also, too, I just want to say, Peg has this whole other life, and has done incredible work in journalism about social justice, especially in areas of climate and racial injustices. And that kind of brings tears to my eyes that I have been able to watch her over the course of time be a crusader for changing things. So that work that she's done has influenced also how we look at what's happening in treatment settings.
I just wanted to add one small thing that I got. Thank you for that, Shahla. That was sweet. But anyways, one small thing that I learned from Shahla, she gave it words. I knew how to do it, but she gave it words. When you don't know how to start something, you don't know how to enter. And it's like, yes, you do know how to enter because you learned in kindergarten how to listen. So listen. Just start with listening. Everyone knows, you really do know how to do that. Sometimes you're listening for the next thing, the next gap for when you're going to say your thing. But if you're really listening, like I was listening to Shahla that whole time and I'm thinking, I have no idea what to say. I hope they just stop the podcast when she gets to the end and we do that random question thing that I'm really scared of doing. But anyways, then towards the end, she was saying that thing, and I was like, oh yeah, Shahla told me about how when we don't know what to do, it's because we don't know how to enter the situation. And it's like most of the time you do, because it's just a basic, the basic tool you bring to everything. I don't want to say you bring a hammer no matter what kinds of nails are in front of you, but as a journalist, I know how to listen and observe and take notes. So when I went places often that were like, I have no idea what's going to happen here. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no idea what story I'm going to write, but I know how to listen and observe and take notes. And that's it. You just start there.
From a behavioral perspective, for all those behavior analysts out there, it's just start the chain, and the chain starts with the entry, and the entry is listening. That is being in a space where you can do that. From a behavioral point of view, if you want to do that, the beginning of the chain is that it's being welcoming and listening. I also want to say, on a cultural note, one thing that Peg and I share is we grew up in the Midwest, and Midwestern humility is a beautiful thing, and Peg keeps demonstrating that over and over again, and I appreciate it. It's a beautiful, it's something I value culturally.
Well, thank you.
All right, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you for our questions of the week.
All right. Thank you very much. At the end of every episode, we like to end all of our guests with 3, as we like to call them, wildcard questions. 2 of the questions we ask to all of our guests, and then the third is truly a wildcard question where we will let kind of the wheel determine which question we will ask. However, we'll start with those 2 questions we like to ask all of our guests. As you probably know, Amanda and I are heavily involved in learning and performance development. So we are always curious on what you are learning. So if possible, if you wouldn't mind briefly sharing something that you've learned lately.
Good Lord.
Or are learning.
Or yes.
Currently. Yeah.
I'm learning to be a better cook. I thought I was a pretty good cook. I am a pretty good cook. Honestly, I am. But I've been following the new pathways. Christopher Kimball is
nice.
traveling with Milk Street and that style of cooking. And I'm learning some new stuff. I can't believe it. All these years, I'm 62. I've been cooking since I was 8, and I'm still learning. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. I love that.
I need to give a different answer because I was
Shoot, I'm sorry.
No. Well, no, I am not learning to cook better. I wish that I was, and you are a fabulous cook. But no, because I was on the podcast a few days ago for the other book that I was working on. I gave one answer, so I'm thinking about another answer, and I'm thinking of 2 really different things. One is I'm learning to play with LOL dolls in imaginative ways, and that's been interesting. You'll appreciate this, Peggy. We made a Harry Potter hat, so the LOL dolls are playing Harry Potter, which is an interesting fusion. This is all with my granddaughter, so that's what I'm learning. I'm also learning, kind of in a more serious realm. Students are changing over time, and they are confronted with so much. And I'm learning some strategies with them about how to have hard but safe conversations. And I want to give out a shout out to my legal and ethical class for helping with that. They're just beautiful. But we even have come up with like a signal system of when things, are triggering us a little bit, when this is a hard conversation. And that's been kind of cool to explore that with the students.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Because to show you're always learning something.
Always.
Next question I have for you guys. Let's say tonight, instead of 24 hours in a day, you have 25 hours. What are you going to do with your extra hour?
Sleep.
That's my answer
actually,
too.
That's today. That's the first
me.
thing that came to mind. Sleep is so important.
Right.
Yeah, so that would be the thing.
Beautiful. All right. And now for the last question. We will go ahead and do our wheel spin here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. And Peggy, if you don't mind, I will leave the honors to you. Here in a second, I'm going to go ahead and hit play on the spinner. Whenever you are ready, if you don't mind, just tell me when to stop it. We've got numbers 1 through 12 on the spinner, and in front of me, I have a list of questions titled 1 through 12. And then whatever number it lands on will be the last question I ask to you, the group. So I'll go ahead and start it. And whenever you're ready, Peggy, just tell me to stop, and then we'll figure out which question we're going to ask.
What a funny little thing. Stop. They're upside down now.
All right. So this one might make you guys think a little bit, but what is the best advice you have ever received?
Oh, I don't have to think about that one at all. There's no mistake you can't fix.
That is very good advice.
Oh, I love that.
It was from a boss,
Oh, that's really good.
but he was also the son of a preacher. So maybe that's where it came from. I'm not sure, but I loved it. I never forgot it. It was such a gift to hear that.
This is advice I'm still working on. I think I'll work on all my life. But it actually comes from something. I'm a Baha'i, and there was a passage that we were studying, and there was one line in it that I've been thinking on a lot. I think it's good advice, and it was elevate all, malign none. And I've been thinking about that, and that is harder than you think. But I think that the idea was if we all do that, that society will raise up, and that will, it kind of goes with the theme, I guess, of, move towards the things you want to grow. And I
Build up.
think, yeah. So that's it.
I love both of those. And that was the first time we've had that question. So that was cool.
Oh,
Whew, I didn't
Awesome.
get the cartoon question.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
honestly, I was racking my brains if it was the
Yeah.
cartoon question. All I could think of was Dory, which is
Oh,
interesting.
that's beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank, thank you so much.
Yes.
Like
Oh,
really.
this was, I get so nervous about these, but I'm okay. I can do this.
you did
I can
great.
answer questions.
Yes, you did great. And thanks for sharing your time with us, and people who will listen. I think it's an important conversation to continue to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
it'll be
I
fun.
gotta go.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank you guys
Thanks,
for joining
everybody.
us.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Amanda, I'll see you next week.
Okay. Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
If you or someone you know is looking for some CEUs, head over to bcbaceu.bluesprigautism.com and use the promo code PODCAST to get $5 off any CEU in the catalog. A link to the site can be found below in the description. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.